This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1658, Off the Rack Reviews. And welcome to the show. I'm Brian Chrisman.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo.
And I'm Chris Eberly.
Yeah, I couldn't let this go without playing the Batman theme song. It's one of the greatest theme songs of all time.
Heck yeah, man.
I know, just one of my favorites.
Everybody knows that song.
Yes.
Word and music by Neil Hefti.
That's correct.
Now, most people don't know, though, the beginning of it. The atomic batteries to power, turbines to speed.
Okay. Anyway, because as we all know, recently, this past Friday, June 9th, after a short battle with leukemia, Adam West passed away at the age of 88.
That's great.
That's amazing.
Great that he made it to 88.
Well,
Good
yeah,
heavens.
sure. I mean,
yeah.
Probably, as you know, I'm a kid of the 70s. You know, I watched the reruns of Batman in the mid-70s. That's where I got my, hooked onto, not just TV and everything, but of course Batman and everything. Yep. And he was always my Batman.
Yes, he was.
I just loved him. It was great to just see in his life all many things that have happened. Remember how long it took for the DVDs to come out?
Oh yes,
that was only a few years ago.
Yeah.
I thought we'd never see him in our lifetime.
Me too.
So even maybe it said so much on the air.
We nearly didn't see him in his lifetime.
Yeah, and so that happened. He was still on the convention circuit.
Yep, the animated movie came out.
And a movie came out with that. The merchandising came out with the toys
the
and the
Mattel
figures
toys.
and the hot toys with oh my God, with the Batman.
Do you have that one?
I don't.
Neither do I.
I
hemmed and hawed.
Yeah, we hemmed and hawed on buying those.
I couldn't do it. I was going to get beat if I ordered that one.
But I mean, and he's in the comics right now with Batman 66.
Yep.
Meeting Green Hornet,
Legion of
Wonder
Superheroes,
Woman 77,
Wonder Woman.
Legion of Superheroes.
Yep.
So I mean,
They did that one shot of the Two-Face episode by what was it, Harlan?
Harlan Ellison, right.
Yep.
Oh, now don't forget the man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh, the man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Exactly.
Fantastic series.
Did he meet Steven Peele, too, or am I hallucinating?
Yes, he did. Yep. I just got that hardback.
Yep. So, I mean, and he embraced his Batman-ness.
He sure did.
Because, he did act, of course, before then. And I've seen some of the things he's done before. Like he did old Perry Mason. He was on, 77 Sunset Strip. But, I mean, he's freaking Batman, and he did the voice of Batman in the 70s cartoons.
Yes, he did.
That whole superhero...
World's finest... what the heck's it called?
the roast?
Yeah, the roast.
The live-action things.
He even did the Back to the Batcave.
Back to the Batcave.
That was a great movie.
He was on the animated series with the Grey Ghost.
He was the Grey Ghost in Batman the Animated Series. He was the mayor in The Batman.
Right. Also the mayor.
Of Quahog, Rhode Island.
Yeah, of Quahog.
Yep. He could have just been cringy old man and said, Batman, screw that. But no, he embraced it.
I loved when he was on, and Big Bang Theory is not one of my favorite shows anymore. I think it's fallen off quite a bit. I know a lot of people don't even like it, which is fine. I get that. I loved the episode he was on, though. And they're in the car, and he said, I never had to say I was Batman. I just showed up, and people knew.
Yeah. So it was wonderful seeing how beloved he was.
Yeah.
Look at all the people posting on forums, or Facebook and Twitter. Oh, this is how I met him as a kid. I met him at a convention once. I posted a picture of that.
I do not have a picture with him, and I could not afford his autograph. Not because it was overly priced. It really wasn't. I ran out of money. But I can say that convention, which I believe was 2011 in Philly, myself and both my boys met him and shook his hand. They don't quite remember it, but I guaranteed them. I said, yes, you actually met him, shook his hand, said hello, and moved on. They met Burt Ward too, but I had met Burt Ward a few years before that. But they can definitely say they've met Adam West, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I saw Bill Sienkiewicz. Do you see Bill Sienkiewicz has already posted of Adam West?
No.
Beautiful, just headshot of Adam West with sort of half the cowl seeping in. It's beautiful. I don't know if Alex Ross did it, but he and I think Sal posted a picture of him
climbing up
the bat wall up to the skies.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
That's a great one.
It's not awesome at why he did it, but it was just
No,
a nice
but it's a
tribute.
beautiful picture. Yeah, that's definitely my Batman.
Yeah.
I can remember getting the plastic Halloween costume because of watching the reruns TV show, and after Halloween was over, cutting that sucker up so I could save the belt part, the insignia, and the mask, and just put it on regular clothes to try and make a better Batman costume. And I ran around in that for months.
Yeah.
I had the Migos.
I'm sorry, Shane.
No, go ahead.
No, so what was thrilling about that show when we watched it in reruns when we were growing up was that, it was that novel two-part thing where, you can look forward to the conclusion of the next episode the following day.
Yeah.
And think about how when they were airing those originally, they were showing 2 a week.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Which was novel. And just my parents would tell me how, because they were watching it when it was actually on, how everybody was tuning in, right, to watch the show and to see what would happen the next night. And, he appeared on Life magazine. People sometimes forget what an enormous pop cultural presence that show had and continues to resonate. So
Yeah, I was at a convention several years ago, sometime maybe like 10, 15 years ago, where Julie Schwartz was talking. And my memory's a little faded, but I'm pretty sure that the Batman comic could have been canceled.
Yeah,
I think him and Carmen and Patina were talking about that. And, I think the Batman TV show arguably sort of helped save that. And I know it has its detractors and so forth with the Biff Bam stuff, but I love it.
Yeah, I love it.
And its impact on popular culture, as I'm sure Adam can speak to, is just undeniable.
Yeah,
exactly the word I was going to use, in fact. I know at least one faculty member at the Bowling Green Pop Culture Department whose office is decorated with Adam West memorabilia, among other DC Comics stuff. But he has the Shakespeare bust with the hidden Batcave button in it.
I had a couple of Amigo figures. I had Batman and Robin and Penguin. I think I had a Joker, and I want to say I had the Batmobile and or something else. I don't remember if it was the van or helicopter or something. None of that survived. I played with that until it all fell apart. In 1989-90, bookstores around here had an episode guide because, of course, it wasn't being rerun at that point. It was before it came back on Nick at Night, and I found an episode guide of it, and I bought it. Then when I went to England my senior year for a music festival, there was a different version of it, so I bought that. And then I gave the Americanized one to a friend for his birthday. I kept the British version one that I still have on my shelf today. Same exact inside, just different covers on it. But that was kind of neat to see it over there. I'm like, oh my God, another one.
And the animated movie they just did just this past year was wonderful. That was so much fun.
Yeah, it was.
Burt Ward, Julie Newmar, provided their voices, and I thought it captured the fun and the feel of the original live-action show, not to mention that great moment that you saw virtually every villain that ever appeared in the show, which I know Shane especially and Pants both adored. So,
yep. Even all 3 Catwomen made an appearance, which was fantastic.
And it's kind of fitting that Adam West, more or less has outlived almost all of the Batman villains from the TV show. Wow.
Yeah. Now, they were supposed to do a second one, I thought.
An animated one?
Yeah. I don't know how far along it got or anything.
And who knows, he may have already done some voice work for Family Guy. We
right.
See it in the upcoming fall season.
Yeah.
But, 88. And he was still out there getting it done. Still working, still drawing a crowd. I mean, he was going to be up at the Terrificon in Connecticut at the end of August with Burt Ward. They were going to have a screening of the Batman movie in a theater with a Q&A. And I was toying with, and may still toy with, going up there for that.
Sure.
It's like just before London, but yeah, he was still out there getting it done. Good.
I heard CNN, and I'm not a big news show person, but I did see a clip run around where CNN talked to Burt Ward, and he had, of course, nothing but nice things to say. And he talked about how he had a whole tour set up with Adam West for later this year that they'll still do in some fashion. But it was fun to listen to him talk about him. Yeah. He really seemed to love his. Burt Ward said he loved his kids, loved his grandkids. He was a great family man. Couldn't get enough of seeing his grandkids. I
think you've had some great grandkids, I believe.
Maybe a great grandkid. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I watched I listened and watched the first 6 or 7 episodes of the TV show.
Oh, yeah.
When I found out, I was upstairs rearranging and going through stuff on eBay, and I put on the first one, just let it run for a while until I got called away from it. But yeah, I thought that was fitting. Yeah. Watch the first few.
Yeah, so I couldn't let it go without mentioning his passing.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you did.
Yeah. All right. Well, actually, in this episode, now that we're going to talk about comics, current-ish comics. But before we get into
They're
that,
still youngish.
Before we get into that, talking about comics, Chris, give one last plug, if you will, before your fantastic, epic sale this coming weekend.
Pansy, I appreciate the time.
You're
Thanks,
very
brother.
welcome.
Again, I'm not exaggerating. This is the largest sale I have done in 18 years of retailing, and I think it's fair to say it's probably one of the largest sales any comic shop in New Jersey has ever done when it comes to back issues. I'm just still digging through boxes. I just pulled out yesterday a first Scott Lang Ant-Man, a Silver Surfer 1 from 1968. This is a serious sale. We're going to have 40,000 books, 175 long boxes on the floor, new wall books. Everything's 25% off, that including the 50-cent comics. I mean, I'm pulling out just lengthy Bronze and Copper Age runs, especially of Marvel stuff. Almost everything's priced below guide even before the discount. We're going to have $5 toys, T-shirts, pop figures. I got about 300 pop figures that I just want to blow out at $5 a pop.
No pun intended.
This is a big sale. It's this coming Saturday, the 17th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. We're opening 2 hours earlier to give people more shopping time, and then Saturday, the 18th, from our regular hours from noon to 8 p.m. I'll be there all day on Saturday, and possibly somebody else in the studio there as well. And
Shane smiles.
I'm very excited. I really want to emphasize to people, if you can get there, this is very much worth going to. If you want to spend your whole day going through long box after long box and just diving into a cornucopia of books from the 1960s to the present, this is the place to be this coming weekend. And again, one of the collections I purchased, if you've missed books from the past 3 years, we have them, and they're 50 cents each for the most part before the discount. And if you want to get into silver, bronze, copper, Marvel, DC, we have thousands and thousands of them too, all mostly below guide, and then 25% off that. And we got hundreds of more like new used trades as well. They're all 25% off at low sticker prices. This is a big sale. This is the biggest I've ever done. I just reserved the truck, the U-Haul I have to rent to get all the stuff from my house to the store this Friday, because I can't fit it all in my shop. So most of it's in my house in the garage. We have like one little pathway you can maneuver to get from the front of the garage to the back. My wife is very tolerant, and it's all going to be on sale this coming weekend. The summer's not quite yet started. Not everybody's dispersed on their trips and so forth. So it's the ideal time to check out the shop and just feast. So, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll be with you in spirit, but I'll be down at Heroes Con that week. It's their 35th anniversary, and I don't want to miss that. Well, yeah, it turns 35 this year. And again, talk about just comics. This is a con that is pretty much just about the comics and the comic creators.
It's a great way to interface with creators.
Yes, and listen to some of this guest list: Jason Aaron, Neil Adams, Daryl Banks, Frank Brunner.
Oh,
yeah, I know. Alan Davis, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Terry Dodson, Steve Epting, Matt Fraction, Francesco Francavilla, Jose Garcia Lopez.
Peter
Gerhard, Joe Giella, Sanford Green, Michael Golden, the Hernandez brothers, Eric Larson, Jason Latour, Mike McCone, Jerry Ordway, David Peterson, Andrew Robinson, Jim Rugg, my goodness, Jim Shooter, Scott Shaw, Joe Staten, Brian Stelfreeze, who was pretty much a fixer at that convention, Babs Tarr, Ben Templesmith, Lee Weeks, Scotty Young, Chip Zdarsky, and Mike Zeck. And that's just a partial list of the creators who are going to be there. I mean, I know that Action Lab, represented by Sean Pryor, is going to be there.
Nice.
Andrew Sharpar is going to be there. So looking forward to that very, very
Shine on, you crazy corduroy. Shine on.
And then, like, the next big con I'm planning to go to, possibly the one in Connecticut, but is the London Super Comic Convention for plug. I'm getting plugs in right now. August 25th, 26th, and 27th in London, England, at the Business Design Center. And just some of the guest list for that: Brian Michael Bendis, Terry Dodson, Tyler Kirkham, Bob McLeod, Bart Sears, Lieber Mayho, Simone Bianchi, Tim Seeley, and Mike Norton. Dave Gibbons, Kieran Gillen, David Hine. Oh, my God. And Dan Slott's going to be there. And maybe I'll just, if I get a chance, maybe just because I'm working for the con, I'll go by, hey, Dan, can you, like, maybe once a month just write me a short story about Silver Surfer? Just write me a short story. Something about that, because by the time the show happens, there's a chance that there may be no more Silver Surfer coming out. And that's just one of my favorite books right now. So again, the London Super Comic Convention, essentially the theme behind it is bringing U.S.-style con to the U.K. And this is more or less a comic creator-driven con. So, again, it's all about the comics right now, today's episode. So,
comics.
You're here.
We got comics.
So, speaking of comics,
we got lots and
spoilers.
of
In this episode, we're going to talk briefly about some comics we sort of chose.
I'm putting air quotes around briefly.
Yeah, we chose over the last several months to talk about more or less en masse in discussion. Things get busy. We forget to do these episodes sometimes, but it's an excuse to talk. It's an excuse. The idea was to talk more about recent-ish comics that we all sort of read. So, Adam, you do have the current list in front of you with the books are in this episode, more or less?
Certainly.
All right, so go ahead, please, with the list.
They are 6 in number. They're the off-the-rack picks for February and March. So, again, hence the current-ish disclaimer. But, 5-month rule. They're still good. So, from February, we have, from Dark Horse, The Visitor, How and Why He Stayed, number 1. From Marvel, Star Wars, Darth Maul, number 1. And from DC, The WildStorm, number 1. And from the month of March, we have the Space Ghost Green Lantern one-shot special. From Dark Horse, again, we have Rebels, These Free and Independent States, number 1. And from Marvel, X-Men Prime, number 1.
Excellent. So, as I mentioned, spoilers. Forewarned is forearmed.
So, look out.
Yeah. But they have, after all, had like 4 months to read some of these things.
Right. So, yeah, it may not be the most current thing, but we
Current.
totally talk about them, so damn it, we're going to talk about them.
Yeah.
It's good to warn them anyway.
Right. So, I will be your moderator for this episode.
Very good.
So, you guys, however you want to do it, is up to you. Just let me know which book you want to talk about, and I will read you the solicits.
Okay. Gentlemen, I have a proposition as far as order. I propose that we do this in a pyramidal structure. Because I happen to know that, I'll explain. I happen to know that for each of these 2 months' worth of books, we have one comic that was read by only one of us because, accessibility. And,
That's how we roll.
One that was read by 2 of us and one that was read by all 3 of us. So I suggest that we begin each wave here, the February wave and the March wave, with the one that was read by only one of us, then move on to the one that was read by 2, and then finish with the one in which 3 of us may participate.
That's fine.
An outstanding battle plan, brother.
All right.
Right. Well, what's up first then,
Well,
sir?
that means we begin February with the comic that only one of us was able to procure, and that is The Visitor, How and Why He Stayed, number 1.
Okay, this is from Dark Horse, as you mentioned.
Indeed.
Written by Mike Mignola, with art by Chris Robertson.
Chris Robertson is the co-writer, actually.
Oh, co-writer. Oh, I'm sorry. With art by Paul Grist. Okay. The original, it's a miniseries. It's the first of 5 issues.
Correct.
In 1944, Hellboy was conjured at a ceremony meant to give Hitler the ultimate occult weapon. Fortunately, Professor Trevor Brittenholm was there to witness and to guide Hellboy to become the greatest paranormal detective in the world. But Brittenholm wasn't the only witness to Hellboy's arrival. A visitor was there, sent to kill the beast that had been prophesied to kill us all. What the visitor saw and why he stayed his hand leads to the most mysterious Hellboy spinoff yet. How's that?
That's Brilliantly rendered, my friend.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. It says right here on the front cover, from the pages of Hellboy, and as that solicitation copy you just read gives the reader to know, this is, in fact, a Hellboy spinoff. I mean, it doesn't say Hellboy, the visitor, how and why he stayed. It's about, and he's right here on the front cover. I'm showing you guys this sort of, well, I'm also showing Chris. You see it, Chris?
I do indeed, brother.
It's, the visitor is an alien being, and he's an outsider not only to the what we, the readers, have come to understand is the Hellboy and his world and his familiar cast of characters. He's also an outsider to planet Earth in general. He shows up on Earth in 1944 when Hellboy first appeared, when, as Brian related to us, when Professor Trevor von Brutenholm conjured him up from hell. And he had been apparently he's a representative of a race of interplanetary busybodies who've taken it upon themselves to guard the universe from occult incursions from the infernal planes that lie just beyond. And the arrival of Hellboy on Earth was seen as one such cosmic threat, being as he is a spawn of an elder god. And so this visitor was sent down to Earth in human disguise, basically to be an assassin. And he's armed with this little glowing greenish brick he's holding here, which he calls a prism, which is apparently some kind of very powerful weapon and or tool that enables him to do various things, including kill demonic offspring like Hellboy. But upon coming to Earth and witnessing the arrival of Hellboy, when he came to Earth, he was just helpless, cute little baby, couldn't even speak. And something in this helpless little creature's aspect stayed the killer's hand. And suddenly he goes from assassin to advocate. Like he calls into Orson back on Orc or whatever and tells him, hey, you know what, I couldn't complete the mission.
Orson back on.
I will stay on Earth and observe his development. Nanu, nanu. And from there, the story just kind of accelerates into a kind of a condensed and truncated, it's just quick glimpses from the first 10 years of Hellboy's life on Earth. From infancy, when he first arrived in 44, to he basically grows to adulthood, like fully functional adulthood, by 1954. And those are the years covered in this issue. And it's just kind of little glimpses of his early life on Earth as seen through the eyes of this outside observer, this assassin turned advocate, this visitor to Earth, who has decided that he's going to play Uatu and just watch Hellboy's development and see if he turns out to be the horrible doombringer that the visitor's fellow aliens believe he's going to be. And he's vowed to correct his mistake and kill Hellboy if it turns out that he's going to turn to evil. So, and it's kind of a heartwarming little thing, because there are elements of humor here. I mean, we see mostly Hellboy as a kid and a young adult throughout the course of this first issue. And by the end of the first issue, he's an adult and he goes on like one of the little missions that we're familiar with from Hellboy comics past. He goes out to find a legendary dragon and fights it, and the visitor actually has to step in and help him out by the end of it. So he's not only watching Hellboy, he's starting to root for Hellboy by the end of this first issue. And the pacing of it is kind of interesting because Hellboy has already grown to adulthood. He's become the character that we've all known for years by the end of this first issue. So one then wonders what's going to happen by the second issue. And I'm sure there are plenty of people listening. That's one of the downsides to our doing these things so far behind schedule and past the original release date. There have been several more issues of this series released.
It may be completed, a miniseries. It's only 5 issues.
I don't think it's quite completed yet,
Okay.
but I'm sure there have been a couple more issues out. But I don't know if this is going to just continue marching through the decades, if the next one's going to cover 54 through 64. I don't know if it's going to weave in and out of the stories of existing published Hellboy comics, and we see events that we've as readers have already seen through the visitor's eyes, or if it's just going to jump straight to the present, and the next the issues 2 through 4 of the miniseries are going to be more about stuff that's happening in the present day. It could go a couple of different ways. It's peculiar thing about this first issue is that it's so self-contained. It finds a neat little resolution. As the Hellboy's reached adulthood, the visitor has actually acted to save his life at least once. And then there's this neat little this image of these little white flowers I'm pointing to here. These are lilies, and this is one of the things that Minuel likes to do, just to throw in little touches from world folklore and mythology. And then there's a legend about a monk who battled a dragon, and everywhere his blood fell, lilies grew. And you got those lilies at the beginning of the story in 1944 when Hellboy comes to Earth, and the visitor notices them again after Hellboy's done battling this dragon at the end of the issue. So it's bookended neatly. It's a neat little self-contained story, and it kind of feels like a prologue to another more self-contained story as opposed to a part of a greater whole. I'd argue it's almost like a zero issue. But certainly it's an enjoyable zero issue. I'm certainly not leveling that as any kind of criticism. The art is by Paul Grist, and the little letter page essay at the back from the editor. Scott Alley is the editor's name. Okay, and he says that when Paul Grist's name was put forward to draw this, everyone in the Hellboy offices were just kind of smacking their heads and saying, why didn't we think of asking this guy to draw Hellboy's story before? Because his artwork, I mean, I've seen some of the other things that Paul Grist has done. I've seen Jack Staff. I've seen Mudman. He's British, and he's got kind of a peculiar sense of humor, and he brings that to a lot of the he does sort of more lighthearted action comics fare, and he's inflected his usual style a little bit to make it look more like like the blocky, angular, very heavily shadowy Mike Mignola Hellboy style, but it's still distinctly his own as well. His figures are kind of longer, and his line work is looser, and it's more sort of elastic looking than the usual Mignola heavy artwork. So it's a lighter feel overall, and that's fitting since this story it's supposed to be kind of an uplifting tale of hope and optimism, and how this alien being that came to Earth to kill this demon child instead took a leap of faith and decided to allow this child a chance to grow up to become a force for good, as opposed to the little, world-ending bastard that his overseers are worried he's going to be. So, that tone, that message is inherent in the lighter style of art that Paul Grist brings to this. He was a perfect choice to draw this story. It's definitely a departure from the usual Hellboy look and the usual Hellboy vibe. And then that's acknowledged in the essay in the back of the book. But they said that this is... Sometimes they finish one of these Hellboy miniseries and they think, wow, that was kind of weird and out of character for us. And they kind of... Sometimes they move past that as quickly as possible and move on to the next thing. This time, they're happy that this has turned out to be sort of a different feel from the standard Hellboy story. It's a different perspective in that it's not really from Hellboy's point of view or that of any of his friends or allies. It's from this complete outsider to his world, and we're seeing things through his eyes. And I guess we'll find out by the end whether or not he regrets the decision he makes in this first issue. I give this story a buy. I've sort of cherry-picked Hellboy stories over the years, and this is already one of the better ones just because it's kind of a fresh and different take on the character and his world. And I'm glad that I decided to give it a chance.
Now, with what you said there, there's almost no way I could read that without going bum 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 blah, 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 with the Mork and Mindy stuff, especially towards the end, as you said, the vignettes through the years. Like that would be this quick montage of like the opening theme song or something. But it looked great. It looked very Hellboy-ish, yet its own feel.
That is what they were going for.
All right, so what's next on the docket?
Next is a thing that Chris and I have bought and read. It will be the WildStorm #1.
All right, the WildStorm #1, written by Warren Ellis, art and cover by John Davis Hunt. A troubled woman, barred by her employer from continuing her research, walks miserably through New York City. It takes her a moment to notice that everybody else looking up. A man has been thrown from the upper floor of the Halo skyscraper. And that woman, Angela Spica, sick from the transhuman implants she's buried in her own body, is the only person who can save him. What she doesn't know is that the act of saving that one man will tip over a vast and secret house of cards that encloses the entire world, if not the inner solar system. This is how the WildStorm begins. And it may destroy covert power structures, secret space programs, and even all of human history. Make sense?
Bum, bum, bum.
Perfectly.
All right, guys, have at it.
Murd, what's your rating?
I give it a buy.
I give it a borrow.
Please elaborate, my friend.
All right. I was looking forward to this because I've always enjoyed Warren Ellis's work. I've enjoyed it immensely, actually, over the years. I read some of his older WildStorm stuff, although not all of it by any stretch. So I was definitely intrigued by this. I always enjoy his voice as a writer, like the dark, witty dialogue was there right away, and the sardonic humor, and I ate that up, and that was throughout the book. I enjoyed the artwork. I thought it was very solid, stylish. Who's the artist? I'm sorry. John Davis Hunt tells a good story. Great action sequences when she's saving the corporate magnate when he falls out of the building. Again, a very solid book. It didn't. Here's the best way to put it. I remember when I first read The Authority, when that came out, I was immediately absorbed and captivated by that book. And obviously, this is a different story. Although it's the engineer was in The Authority, wasn't she, Mert?
Right, yes. You are.
Yep.
Okay, so there was that connection. This didn't grab me in the same way. I don't know if it's. I just wonder if this book would have affected me more if it had been done like in the late '90s, early 2000s. It's addressing themes that I think are still relevant in terms of dark corporate intrigue and cabals and conspiracy theories. I mean, those kinds of themes just don't resonate with me the way they did, like when I was watching the X-Files, for example, back in the 1990s. Considering how our real life socio-political and geopolitical environment is bizarre enough right now, I don't want to say it fell flat because this is well done. It's well told. It's very well drawn. It just didn't resonate with me with me the way I think it should have. So. It's a solid bar for me. Like the Miles Craven character is almost like a dark Tony Stark to me, essentially. So I think the most interesting part of the story for me was the engineer character wandering the streets, trying to make her case to Craven about her own research agenda and what she's dealing with. That I found interesting. Otherwise, though, I was just like, I've kind of read this before, and I think it would resonate more with me when I was living in another time. So it's a solid borrow.
Yeah, and it's kind of a mild buy for me, Chris. So it's not. I didn't rank it too much higher than you did, but I found it enjoyable. As you said, Chris, it's a solid, well-told story, and I'm certainly not going to fault Ellis or Davis Hunt's storytelling abilities in the way that this first issue's tale was told. It's the story. It's a story of. It's a story of rising paranoia and. Okay. Let me just read this quote here from Warren Ellis himself from the back page. I knew I wanted to preserve the themes from the original WildStorm work by Jim Lee and his friends, their fascinations with conspiracy theories and black ops, for instance. But that meant looking at the conspiracy theory landscape of today. So there was a lot of research on, for example, the current state of ufology and the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Additionally, I'm also taking a more novelistic approach. Every 6 issues is a short book, and the WildStorm is a 4-book series, 24 issues or chapters in all. So that's actually fairly ambitious, they're committing to it too. I love the cover dress because they show you the numbers 1 through 24, and there's a little red notch over whichever issue this happens to be in that planned 24-issue maxi series. So if this thing gets canceled before issue 24, everybody's going to look a little silly, I'm afraid. Also, look at the little red box up in the corner. That's the symbol for hurricane warning for boats at sea.
Oh, yeah.
So that sort of lends itself to the rising storm. So there's sort of an ominous air pervading this whole thing. It's in a couple of ways. It sort of reminds me a little bit of some of the things that Moore and Gibbons were trying to accomplish, atmospherically, if not topically or thematically, with Watchmen. I mean, right down to the use of that ever-popular 9-panel grid. I mean, it's not every page is like that, of course, but just about every page is set up in some kind of nice, neat, orderly, symmetrical grid of panels. There's a lot of 9 panels. I found one that was actually 18 panels. 6 in the standard size and then 12 tiny ones along the bottom. That's when Angela Spica is undergoing her painful transformation into the armored engineer. You can see blood leaking through the seams in her armor as she launches herself into the air to save a human life. It's a tale of ever-mounting paranoia and that was a big part of Watchmen too. The cultural paranoia of the 80s, the late Cold War period, and certainly we have different things to be paranoid about here in 2017. But a couple of them are the same. They were worried about an ex-actor, ultra-conservative president who risks, plunging us into conflict with other foreign powers. And now we're here in 2017. We've got an ex-reality show host, ultra-conservative president who's walking a fine line between safety and disaster now. So there's not. It doesn't really get political that way. This story does not. But I'm just kind of putting up the kind of background radiation that this series is tapping into in building this vibe of contemporary paranoia and neurosis. And again, the artwork by John Davis Hunt is very sharp, very neatly detailed, and it's a little bit of Dave Gibbons in it, but also a good bit of say J. Scott Campbell and other WildStorm notables of the 90s. Just the way he draws people's thick lips and heavy black eyebrows. He's tapping into some of the stylistic conventions of that time as well. But again, that tight 9-panel grid, that's just like the visual evocation of neurosis. It's just the idea of this. The inability to deal with the chaos of reality and the ever-present fear that chaos will escalate. And it leads one to try to compress down and parcel out one's vision of reality into nice, neat little boxed-in visions of the world around one. And I think that's my reading of the 9-panel grid and what it means to a series like this. Yeah, so it's a decently told tale. The atmosphere is very well constructed. I feel sort of nervous and on edge just reading it, and it's about government spooks and assassins and as Chris said, dark corporate intrigue. And at least one good, honest person who is not directly involved in all of this, in the person of Angela Spica, who is trying, honestly, to move the world forward to being a better place instead of simply towing the corporate line, or just pursuing the agendas of the agency for whom she too works, I.O. International Operations, who are kind of like the shadow government, one of the major players in this series. The other being the Halo Corporation, which is kind of like an analog of like Macintosh. It's like a big consumer tech company run by a guy named Jacob Marlowe, who is like the Steve Jobs figure, like the tech messiah, and he has been marked for death by International Operations. And so, yeah, it's just kind of introducing the various, not the entire cast has been introduced in the first issue. We'll get Cole Cash, a.k.a. Grifter, in the next issue. But we did get Michael Cray, Deathblow, we got Voodoo, we got the engineer from the Authority, we got Zealot of Wildcats, and yet, do you guys, one thing that I think this series is disappointing me a little bit on is how it is a good story. I like what Ellis is doing here. I like the things he's saying. I like the way the story is being told. But if you're a longtime WildStorm fan and you want to see these familiar characters, they're a little bit unrecognizable. It's like they've been reincarnated in completely different forms. And you guys know what a roman à clef is? It's French for novel with a key. And a roman à clef is a novel in which all the different characters and situations are supposed to be analogs for, like, real people, real historical occurrences. It's a real-world story and real-world people in a fictional disguise. Okay. So this, I would argue, is kind of like a BD à clef, a comic with a key. In that it's taking all these old WildStorm characters and introducing them in radically altered forms, and it's almost like you need a little key or legend to be able to tell which character is supposed to be which. Jacob Marlowe is the one that I actually had to look him up. He's supposed to be Lord Emp.
Oh. Who
was like the lecherous little person with the sunglasses and the
from Wildcats.
Big pointy white hair from Wildcats, right, of the Cherubim. And eventually there's going to be alien and UFO conspiracy theory elements at work in this series. We know that, but this first issue doesn't really bring that across that clearly. So one expects the Cherubim and like the Daemonites, the major alien races from the Wildcat series, to probably figure into that eventually.
And I sort of remember, now that you said Jacob was Lord, I sort of remember him being called Jacob at times as well. I don't know if I would have picked that out if I'd have read that, though.
I wouldn't have at all if I hadn't gone to Wikipedia. But there are some panels that do make Jacob Marlowe look like he's kind of on the short side.
Okay.
So there you are. So and that there's still hope for those of you who are like old school WildStorm fans. There is such a thing in the WildStorm backstory as the Bleed. It's their take on the multiverse.
Yep.
Before WildStorm as a whole was absorbed into the DC version of the multiverse and became just like Earth 51 or whatever number that they are, or it might be Earth 50. I'm not sure. But anyway, so there's a chance that perhaps. This altered reality is directly connected to the WildStorm universe that people would recognize. Yeah. Like there's kind of a hint on the very first page. I do like this first page where the first thing you see is Zealot. She's looking into a seedy bathroom mirror where she's just committed an execution. She's terminated an asset, and she's got blood spots all over her face, exactly in the same configuration as the face makeup, like the war paint that Zealot used to wear in the old comics. So there's kind of an eerie, Lacanian moment there where she's looking at herself, seeing the being that she used to be in an earlier version of continuity, and then she washes, those stains of her past history, her backstory, right off of her face.
And almost washing all of that history away for us, the readers, getting ready for what they're going to do now.
But is it gone forever, or will it be blown back in the wind, the gale force winds of the WildStorm? Yeah. So I'm just thinking, Warren Ellis also wrote Supreme, the Blue Rose, which is also about continuity revisionism and like existential paranoia and all that good stuff that he seems to be building into this series as well. So there's every possibility that longtime WildStorm fans might find something they'll recognize in future issues. Meantime, though, I am kind of intrigued by where Ellis is going with this, and even if it isn't really the best, it's not going to give longtime WildStorm fans an immediate thrill. It's still a well-told tale, and it's tapping into a certain unsettling part of our current 21st century zeitgeist. And I'm going to keep on reading it, and hopefully he's going to get a chance to, one way or another, tell the entire story he had in mind. They may eventually have to just start telling it in like 6-issue equivalent graphic novels instead of single issues, but I do hope he manages to get all the way through to the end, and I think I'll be following along for as long as my budget allows, and and as long as the marketplace will support the issues of this series to be published. So I do give it a buy.
Very good.
Wow, that was a lot.
There's really no briefly when it comes to me.
No kidding, but it's all
Well
good.
done.
It's all
Well
good
done.
though. Just as a highlight, in Comic Geek Speaks History, episode 489, we did a Book of the Month Club on The Authority, Volume 1, Relentless. We did talk about it, but I really have virtually no exposure to the WildStorm universe.
I read all of Gen 13, Wildcats, the first 20 or 30 issues of The Authority. What else was there?
Ellis did a great run on the latter part of the Stormwatch book, which I highly recommend.
Stormwatch, I read some of that, not all of that. It was a good universe that they had built.
Okay. All right, then I guess up next is Darth Maul #1. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so this solicit was bred on hate, fear, and anger, steeped in the ways of darkness, and trained to kill. Darth Maul's time as apprentice to Darth Sidious has long been cloaked in shadows, but at last we will reveal his tale of revenge. From writer Cullen Bunn and artist Luke Ross comes a tale of rage unleashed as Darth Maul prepares for his first encounter with the Jedi, issue 1 of 5.
All right, Shane, what's your rating?
I'm going to give it a buy. It's a little bit of a weak buy, but a buy nonetheless.
Mert?
Yeah, just a borrow for me.
Borrow for me as well. Shane, why don't you start?
Okay, so the weak part of the buy is partially because in the first 6 pages or so, you see that creature from The Force Awakens, the Rathtars. Right. That's a little weird to me. It's a little bit forced as you read this story of Darth Maul going through a first kind of battle encounter, honing his skills to go up against Jedi, which he wants to prove himself worthy to Darth Sidious. So he's kind of in the shadows after he battles this Rathtar and wins, which there's a whole pack of them. It's not just a single one. You're next shown him at Coruscant, where he's kind of eavesdropping on Jedi, taking some risks. he goes to meet with Darth Sidious, who kind of berates him a little bit for not following his orders and taking too many risks. Because we all know what Darth Sidious' plans are, those of us who have seen The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones and all that. But at this time, Darth Maul doesn't know. So he's still trying to prove himself to his mentor, his lord. And Darth Sidious wants none of that because he has his plans set and wants to execute them in his own fashion. But he gives him one more chance to go and find something, battle something. And he ends up going to a place called Kelix, tries to track down something to prove himself, and it ends up being a Jedi Padawan that's been captured and is going to be auctioned off. And Darth Maul uses his own instinct to mow down just about everybody, and then interrogate one creature that pleads for his life, to get some information of where this Padawan could be so that Darth Maul can capture it, go up against it, whatever he wants to do to prove himself to Darth Sidious. That's the whole first part of the story. It's well drawn. The artwork is very good. It's let's see, it's written by Colin Bunn and Luke Ross does the art. It's beautiful. I just think it's really forced with that Rathtar in the beginning. That's really kind of weird to me, to try and shoehorn something like that in there. I know it's all part of lore, and it was fun to see in The Force Awakens the first time, but as I re-watched that, I think that's more of a sillier part that is okay. So to choose that for Darth Maul to go up against right now in the first 6 to 8 pages of the issue was a little bit weird to me. But once you get to Coruscant, talking with Darth Sidious, that whole part really kind of resonates true for what I would think Darth Maul and Darth Sidious would discuss, and Darth Sidious having all of his plans in his head for what and how he wants to execute everything against the Jedi so that he becomes controller of everything. A really, really good part that also made this a buy for me is Chris Iliopoulos' and Jordi Belaire's backup story, which is very cute, about Darth Maul's probe droids that come out of the Sith infiltrator on Tatooine, and they have an adventure with a droid and some Jawas, and it's very cute, and it's awesome. Anytime I can see Chris Iliopoulos' work, I love it. So this was just great pleasure for me to see that part. So that, I gave it a buy. I'll continue with it and see where it goes. I do like that Darth Maul has gotten more time since The Phantom Menace, that they used him in Clone Wars, that they used him in books and other comic books. So I was glad to see this come about. The first part here is a little bit weak, and I'm curious enough to see where it goes. But yeah, it's barely a buy for me this time.
Murray, go ahead.
Alrighty. It was a little bit underwhelming for me too, Shane, but I agree with a lot of the points you made. The Rathtar, first of all. I do indeed see where you're coming from.
Just silly.
Taking an element from
a movie that's
Force Awakens trilogy and casting it back into the prequel trilogy era. I think Colin Bunn just wanted to be the first person to use this new monster in comics,
and that's fine.
Yeah, and actually, it's a Star Wars monster, and much like the majority of my love for Star Wars as an entertainment franchise has to do with the aliens and the monsters. But yeah, I will agree with you that the Rathtar in The Force Awakens was one of the weaker creatures we've seen. Just a big slobbery, eyeball-studded, tentacly sack. It's kind of like a mobile Sarlacc, I think, was the idea they had in mind for that. And it's not my favorite. The CGI was kind of dumb looking. I wish they'd done practical effects for it. But still, Darth Maul versus giant slavering monsters in a swamp. I kind of got off on that a little bit. I enjoyed that part. But then, as the story wears on, Darth Maul, he struts and frets and seethes and fumes and smolders and broods. He looks very good while doing it.
Oh, yeah.
I totally agree with what you said about the art.
Out of this world.
Luke Ross. Talk about a 90s artist whom this Marvel Star Wars line has given an opportunity to show how much he's improved over time.
Yeah.
As Salvador LaRocca was to Darth Vader, so Luke Ross now is to Darth Maul. I mean, I saw his artwork on the Hercules series that Dan Abnett did not too long ago. His stuff looked good there. I think it looks even better here. I mean,
Let me interject for just a moment, if I may. I apologize. I want to piggyback on that. If you want to see Luke Ross at the peak of his powers, Dark Horse Comics, Samurai Heaven and Earth, Volumes 1 and 2, written by Ron Mars. Some of the most stunning art I've ever seen in a comic. It's all about a samurai from the era of feudal Japan and his adventures trying to track down his lost love when their stronghold's attacked and they're separated. It's gorgeous. So I'm sorry for stepping on your toes here. I'm not surprised at how beautiful the art is in this book. So go ahead.
No, I take no offense whatsoever, Chris. Thank you for sharing that, actually. Those of you listening at home, Samurai, Heaven and Earth. Jot that title down because it receives a very high praise from Mr. Eberly. So yes, Luke Ross's artwork is looking great here. He makes Darth Maul look every bit as menacing as you could expect him to be. I love this image from the last page. Where he's just sitting there, just kind of seething and plotting to himself. Yes, I'm going to go hunt a Jedi now, as he then immediately commits cold-blooded murder and flies off on this little private errand of his. But yeah, so it's fairly exciting, and it builds the air of menace around the character that he needs to have. Unfortunately, it doesn't really build a character under that air of menace, and that has always been my problem with Darth Maul. I mean, this is not the first Darth Maul miniseries that's been published, and not the first I've read. There was one published as early as like a year after The Phantom Menace was in theaters. Dark Horse put it out. It was written by Ron Mars. As I recall, it had Darth Maul going up against the Black Sun.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Talking about concepts from other eras of Star Wars history and even from the extended universe being moved into the prequel timeline. But yeah, that miniseries too, my problem was it was plot heavy and like it didn't do anything to build the character in any way. Yeah. I really... To me, in order for a comic about Darth Maul to really succeed, it has to make me as a reader understand him as something more than just a bunch of martial arts moves and makeup effects. He's a cool-looking character, but there's more of the cool-looking than there is of the character, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah. He never really got much chance to become anything more than vaguely menacing in his brief appearance there in that one movie he was in. But I do understand that Cullen Bunn, the writer, and Marvel in general have their hands somewhat tied when using some of these like ancillary characters, because you never know when Lucasfilm is going to swoop in and want to do a Star Wars anthology movie about them, and then anything you try to establish about the character will just get retconned right out of there. So they're kind of hands. Their hands are tied as far as how much they can really do to build up a character like this.
I will say they did a nice job in the Clone Wars cartoon and the Rebels cartoon with giving Darth Maul a story, a background, some information. So it's worth checking out if you can find the specific episodes to watch.
Well, in that case, I'm kind of hoping that Bunn and company draw on some of that.
Yeah, I am too.
That is an official non-comics media Lucasfilm product, so it should be fair game to use as part of his backstory. But yeah, so we've got 4 more issues here. I would like to see Darth Maul, do something other than just pace back and forth like a caged tiger. His inner monologue, it's well enough written, it's in character, but unfortunately, once again, there's not much of that character in which to put that dialogue, and so in the end, he just sounds kind of whiny. And like he's, I want to go out and do something. I want to kill the Jedi, but I can't kill the Jedi. And he just kind of beats that horse for 20 pages. So by the end of this first issue, I was kind of tired of hearing his inner monologue. So if anything, I think I liked Darth Maul a little less by the end of reading this first issue than I did when I started. But again, I'm definitely going to buy the rest of the miniseries. I've bought most of it already to see where this goes. I'm taking bets, and somebody out there can tell me whether or not this was a wise bet or not, but I'm betting that the Padawan that Darth Maul is going to go after is going to turn out to be Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Could be.
Just seems the natural progression of things.
And their stories tied together throughout the cartoon as well.
It would be nice to have him and his master Qui-Gon have a run-in with Darth Maul before their big duel of the fates at the end of Phantom Menace. And the probe droid problem story by Chris Eliopoulos is indeed very cute. Although I should point out that it basically increases the cover price of this issue by $1.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would just be a normal 30-page your 32-page issue, 20 story pages without that added thing. Okay. Anyway, I gave it a borrow. Chris, you're up.
All right. If you could, gentlemen, turn to the last page of the Darth Maul story and look at the top left corner panel.
Oh, that was the image I was talking about, Chris.
The hatred in those eyes. The artwork is so stunning. And again, I just know Ross from that Samurai Heaven Earth story I was mentioning before. Just the way he captures an expression. I think this is a guy one of the most overlooked and underrated artists in comics. I mean, he's worked for quite some time, but he deserves every project people will give him because I think his skill's right there in that expression on Darth Maul's face. Tremendous artist. Now, as far as the story itself, I enjoyed it. I mean, here's my problem. Murr was alluding to this before. I find Darth Maul one of the most uninteresting characters in the Star Wars universe. I think he is visually compelling. You know, he's got the double lightsaber. He looks really menacing and sinister, and he has that whole Sith aura about him. But beyond that, I find the character rather vacuous and one-dimensional. This story didn't do much to change that. You know, he wants to fight. He's chomping at the bit. He hates the Jedi. And that's about it. And in some ways, I found the Aleppo story more interesting than I found the main Darth Maul story. I mean, the art, like I said, the art is masterly in this story, and for that alone, I enjoyed it. I mean, if the lesser artist had been this, I probably would have given it a low borrow. Now, having said that, as Merv was mentioning, this could go into a very interesting direction, and if the rest of the series, because I have not read the rest of it yet, further develops Darth Maul's character, that I would find more interesting. Mm-hmm. But the few times I've read Darth Maul stories, and I have not yet seen those Rebels episodes Shane is referring to. Shane, is that second season or third?
This last one, third. Well, he's through more than just the last season, but the last season finishes his story in Rebels.
But they bring him in the second season?
Uh-huh.
Because I've only watched the first season and the first episode, that Vader one from the second. So
he's throughout the second and third seasons.
Okay. Well, that I'm glad to hear that because I have to catch up with that show. So, I even remember when I watched The Phantom Menace, especially when I got over, oh wow, it's a Star Wars movie, and I watched it a second time and I said, my God, this movie's terrible. I wanted them to do more. Like, he barely spoke in that movie. Like, I wanted so much more with this character, and I just feel like with this comic again, it's like yet another tease. But you know, where in 1999 it was a thrilling tease, now it's like, all right. You know, this is just, I mean, come on, I can go back and read the Kieran Gillen Darth Vader series, which is a masterpiece. Yeah. Or, you know, I can watch this guy fighting Rathtars, and it's just not compelling. And that, the character is not compelling to me.
And some of that is still some bitterness, if you can call it that, from when The Phantom Menace came out. His character, his look and everything were so heavily used as the main marketing tool that when the movie came out and he was in it for all of 30 seconds, we're all sitting around going, what was that? Because that's not what I expected. He was in and out before I could sneeze, yet, man, his face was everywhere on every
in the scene where it's not Ray Park's voice, they got a very menacing voice actor for the voice. Yep. And I'm like, wow, I love the voice, I love the look, and then he's dead. Yep. and, you know, it just... The comic kind
of... By the way, spoilers for the movie.
Back from 1999.
Yeah.
So the comic kind of brought that feeling back to me. And, like, this is a well-executed book, and the art is stunning. But, again, it's my own hang-up. He's not interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I hope they make him interesting, because
and to me,
I want the innards of the character to match the look. I'm sorry, Shane, go ahead.
No, I really hope that they pull some of what they did for Clone Wars and Rebels into this in some fashion, because they really do, to me, they really did make him interesting through those two series. I was quite surprised.
All right. Excellent. What's next?
Oh, one last vote of praise for Luke Ross's artwork. There's one panel here, like halfway through the story, when Darth Maul is stalking those two Jedi on Coruscant
in the back alley.
Right, and then there's this overhead shot of the two Jedi that find themselves facing an empty alley with their shadows stretching out in front of them. Total noir. Noir.
If I had to say anything was wrong with the artwork, and again, it's beautiful, But when he draws Darth Sidious, he looks very much more Emperorish than what Darth Sidious did in that movie, because he had not gotten to the Revenge of the Sith part yet. So I thought that was
corrupted his flesh yet.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of an odd choice to go that way. But it's in the shadows. I get it. It just looks very much more Emperorish than it does Darth Sidious at that point.
Okay.
Or Senator Palpatine-ish.
Or Senator Palpatine-ish.
All right, so that we're done with the first half.
Right, February is behind us.
And now for a brief respite.
Bum, 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 bum.
How about that predictable?
The signs were there.
Unput.
French for little.
Oh, go kidding, Dick Tracy. All right, time again for Muddle the Murder, our trivia segment. And still up for grabs is the original art of Wolverine, and we think it's Jean Grey.
Snickety snick.
From Jay Corum. A beautiful piece of artwork. And our contestant for this episode is Mike Atchison.
All right, I'm about to be attacked.
He says, hey there, Geek Speaker, so that you don't run short on penultimate Muddle the Murder, I have decided to try my hand at this. And he says, I very much appreciate your latest episode, which was a little while ago, Off the Racks reviews on the button, by the way. All right. Marvel pre-1970.
All right.
What Spider-Man villain first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 41, October of 1966?
All right. This is not fair, Mike. You know this is one of my weaknesses. Just like aiming his dart right at my Achilles heel.
That's right.
I may need to use you as a lifeline here, Chris, but...
No, he can't.
Well, no, I mean, if I don't get it, Chris gets to guess.
All right.
I'm going to say Hammerhead.
Chris?
Rhino!
There it is! There it is! He didn't let me down! I knew it! Yes! Awesome.
Happy to oblige, Pantaloons. Happy to oblige.
I could almost... I couldn't contain when I was reading the answer. Oh, my God! Yes, it's the Rhino. All right, question 2. DC 1970 to 2000. In Superman Family number 208 from July 1981, Linda Danvers, a.k.a. Supergirl, joined the cast of what soap opera? As a bonus, what was her character's name?
I have no chance whatsoever of coming up with the character, and frankly, this soap opera is a little outside of my reach, too.
Well, go for a yoink.
Yeah, not a zonk, a yoink.
Yeah, I can rule out Secret Hospital because that's in the wrong universe. DC Universe soap operas. Under a Yellow Star.
You were half right. Secret Hearts.
Okay, well, Secret Hospital was the soap opera that Mary Jane Watson Parker starred in back in the late 80s, early 90s.
And her character's name was Margot Hatton.
Margot Hatton.
I knew she studied TV production at Stanhope University, but I did not know that she was in a soap opera.
All right, Mike's going for the muddle here, and that piece of artwork. Question 3, Independent, post-2000. In Frank Cho's Skyborn 5-part series by Boom Studios, which began in 2016, the 3 Skyborn children descend from what biblical character?
Wow. Okay, Skyborn children. Now, there's a few things this could be, of course, but I'm gonna say Samson.
No, Lazarus.
All right.
Wow. All right, Mike. Congratulations. You have muddled the murd, and you are the, hopefully, proud owner of this wonderful piece of art from Jay Corum.
It really is wonderful. It looks
gorgeous.
It's like Joe Madureira back in his prime. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm very happy to be able to send this out to Mike, because Mike has been very kind to us over the last year or so. And it was a real pleasure to meet him in person out there in Chicago, and to receive largesse from his hands. And now, get to pay a little of that back. So, congratulations, Mike.
Awesome.
All right, so let's continue on with the off the racks. We're going to March now. So how does the pyramid go in this?
Well, we're going to begin with the Green Lantern Space Ghost special, and it will be Shane center stage.
All right. Well, Shane, I'm going to read the original solicit. Again, as you mentioned, Green Lantern / Space Ghost. It's listed as an annual #1. Is that correct? It's an annual?
It doesn't say that on the cover.
Now let's check the indicia.
Go ahead.
It's probably inside the back cover. Green Lantern Space Ghost Special #1.
Okay. Special #1. Written by James Tynion IV and Chris Sebula. Backup story written and art by Howard Chaykin, and I guess the art and cover by Ariel Olivetti. Trapped in a strange rift in time, Green Lantern and Space Ghost are forced to battle a variety of foes and each other. And even if they manage to survive, they will be thrown into a world with no concept of interstellar travel, or even what an alien is. Stripped of their weapons by a xenophobic culture, the duo will have to battle to regain them. But what happens when Space Ghost dons the Emerald Ring, and Hal Jordan puts on the power bands? And in the backup feature, Rough and Ready were once the toast of nightclubs, variety shows, late-night chat fests, and Broadway. Learn how they became the comedic duo of yesterday before they hit rock bottom today. All right, Shane, have at it, sir.
All right. I would give this a buy. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I will say that the art is very well done. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8-ish pages look almost painted. And I'm like, all right, this is really good. It takes a little bit of a turn then when they land on a planet and you start seeing some of the backgrounds. It looks like they merged drawings of some kind with actual photographs of forests and trees.
Looks kind of like video game graphics.
Video game is something. There's something more realistic about the background. Now, at first, I was like, oh, because I usually don't like that. But they really do pull it off as the story goes along, and you see the city that the xenophobic people live in, the backgrounds of where they are and what they're doing. It really does come together, and it's not nearly as detracting as what I thought those first couple pages that you see background images. Space Ghost and Green Lantern interacting is very well done. You have Hal Jordan being sent here by Selleck from a signal that they're receiving to try and protect a weapon that is being mentioned in this message. And Green Lantern goes out there and runs into, oh my God, what's his name? I'm totally Larfleeze, who heard the message also and is trying to get it for himself because everything's mine. He's not in it for more than just those couple pages. These insect creatures come in.
Zorak.
Thank you. Which Green Lantern kind of is just getting ready to start the battle, but then Space Ghost comes out of nowhere in his cloaked, ghost form and does battle with them. He and Green Lantern go at it. They end up crashing on this planet with this xenophobic culture who captures them, takes away their weapons, and Green Lantern and Space Ghost end up talking their way through to make these people understand they're here to help in some way, but not after, of course. Not until after they battle each other because they still, of course, don't trust each other like most pairings of first meets go. They do get handed their weapons back. They each put on their opposite weapons for like a page, maybe a panel or two. Green Lantern fires the bands and gets blown backwards. Space Ghost fires the ring and launches up some logs, tree logs a little bit. It's not like it's for pages and pages. That it was kind of funny that they made such a point of saying that in the solicit. But it is fun pairing of people battling and trying to get the xenophobic people to trust them, because really they are both space police. Once Green Lantern kind of explains what his perspective is, Space goes, oh, you and I are kind of a like mind, protecting everybody instead of thinking that they were enemies. And then there's a little girl here whose name is, I just lost it. It's Killery is her last name.
I love her hat.
Oh, it's a great hat.
Reminds me of General Ginger's from the Oz books.
Keila Gilly, Keila, Keila Gilly, Gilley. And she's a very little girl here. And this weapon that they're looking for, as it turns out, is just a language barrier. That is their word for vehicle. They have no concept of space travel. This scientist is trying to create the first thing to take him up into space, something that he has dreamt about since he was young. He figured out how to build something, found some people that were of the same like mind as him to become more exploratory than introverted, and they all build this vehicle to take him up, but they call it a weapon. That's their word for vehicle. So there really is no weapon, but of course, being a xenophobic people, the mass of people don't want to become space explorers or anything. They want to stay in their own little world because that's all they really care about. Throughout the story, the people who don't want them to go into space battle and end up hurting the professor, who sort of starts dying. And he asks Space Ghost and Green Lantern to take him up into space before he dies so he can see what it's like. So Green Lantern encases him in a shield, carrying him. Space Ghost carries the girl up. And the professor asks if he can... It's better than he could have ever imagined. So they decide to kind of funeral pyre him off into space as he passes away. And then they take the girl back down. And within the next couple pages, you realize that the little girl is now grown up, time has passed, and they're now ready for this vehicle to take first flight. And it ends with the words, "the beginning." And she wants to go and find Space Ghost and Green Lantern to thank them, show them that they have made it. And I think Green Lantern promised her a badge, or maybe Space Ghost promised her a badge, like a police badge. And she wants to go, quote, collect on that. Because she says, I hope that they have Green Lantern, Space Ghost, this is Keila Gilly. You knew me a long time ago. You helped us change our world. If someone can hear this, if someone knows them, let them know I'm coming. We're finally leaving. And Space Ghost better have that badge he promised me. It's very cute. It's very nice. The artwork is absolutely outstanding. I think it really looks almost painted the whole way through. Again, just that background stuff kind of threw me off a little bit, but it really blended well with the rest of the artwork as the story progressed. It really looks like it's the beginning of something, and I hope they revisit this at least in another special when she might see them again, and maybe they have an adventure or something. I don't know. And if it's standalone, then it's standalone. You know that they did their job. They protected these people. They got them to change their focus and decide they want to go out in the world. And the end finished with this girl being all grown up, getting ready to take this ship out into space to find them. So it's a pretty good story. I enjoyed it. The book cost $4.99. I think it was kind of worth it with that story and then the Rough and Ready backup. Very cute. I don't know that much about Rough and Ready. I know my mom used to kind of quote their song. I think something that she used to say, Rough and Ready. I'll have to ask her about that once I read this. I want to see what she says about it because it kind of looks like Droopy Dog to me. But it is that's the way it's drawn. But it tells a good origin story of them. But again, I don't know that much about them, so I'll have to do some research into what the rest of the solicit says about how they first came together for what came next. I don't know what came next with them. I knew that they were characters, but I don't know much about Rough and Ready.
Yeah, neither do I, actually. Yeah, Brian, have you ever seen any Rough and Ready cartoons?
I probably have. Nothing jumps to mind right now.
Yeah. So I think it's worth it. It's definitely worth a buy. If you like Space Ghost and you like Green Lantern, it's a great story. It has its clichéic pairing of two heroes that don't trust each other yet, so they battle a little bit, then they come to trust each other, save the day, and help the people. So it is very predictable, but it's very nicely told and very well drawn.
Yep, just looking over your shoulder, I can see that the art is as beautiful as you've described.
Yeah, especially there's one panel towards the middle of the story where Space Ghost and Green Lantern, Space Ghost is flying at Green Lantern to, attack him, but it just looks spectacular going across the whole top of 2 pages. It's very well done.
Sort of blurred and distorted slightly to show movement.
Yeah. I really did enjoy it.
Yep. See, that is the one of these Hanna-Barbera DC hero crossovers that I was not able to pick up at Golden Eagle. That is the one that apparently sold out the fastest.
And I hope they do more with this. I like the idea of this line. I like the little backups of being just Hanna-Barbera characters, not involving DC characters. The Jetsons one, just a side note, the Jetsons one is out of this world. Very, very cleverly done and gives you an origin of Rosie the Robot, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's well done. I say if you like Space Ghost, pick it up.
I did read that Jetson story with Rosie. It was
I thought it was funny.
A little disturbing to me.
A little bit.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you who Rosie,
No.
How Rosie came to be, but yeah.
But you get an origin.
All right. So what's next, gentlemen?
Well, I guess it's time to rhapsodize about Rebels.
All right. Rebels. Rebels, These Free and Independent States, issue 1 of 8. With Brian Wood doing the writing chores and Andrew Moody on the artwork. In 1775, Seth Abbott fought to win his fellow Americans their independence. In 1794, his savant son John comes of age as their new nation faces multiple threats: high seas terrorism, fresh aggression from Britain, and intense political division at home. When Congress authorizes building America's first Navy, the famous 6 frigates, John Abbott signs up.
Mert, go ahead. What's your rating?
Oh, it's a buy. And, need we ask?
To quote our dear departed Jamie D, bye, bye, bye!
Yes. That's precisely what my guess would have been. Let me go first, Chris, then I'll just step out of the way and let you cut loose. So, yep, this is the second volume of Brian Wood's Rebels. It's an 8-issue miniseries, although it should be noted that this is not going to be just one continuous, uniform 8-part story. It's going to be broken down into a couple of different little arcs within that 8-issue run. And the first arc, it revisits the character of Seth Abbott from the first arc of the first volume of Rebels, but several years later. It sort of jumps around in time. He just kind of Wood just kind of tells whatever stories he wants to tell about the Revolutionary War era without worrying about going in chronological order. But this first one picks up after the American Revolution has already been fought and more or less won, and as the fledgling nation of the United States is facing new challenges at home and abroad. It's a neat little tale because it operates on 2 levels. It's about the beginnings of American naval power, but it's also a story of a father and a son. Shane, take note.
I know.
Because Seth Abbott's got a son now, and the son is...
that one up.
Well, yeah, that's it. The solicitation calls him a savant. He's what probably would have been called an idiot savant in the late 18th century, and equally probably is what would be diagnosed as autistic in the present day. He's got an encyclopedic knowledge of ships and naval warfare, and he's able to sneak off on his own and build his own ship from having memorized plans for a boat that he'd seen. And so after that, his father takes him away to the naval shipyards, and young John Abbott finds himself enlisted as a shipbuilder just about, a few years before Alexander Hamilton finally convinces Congress that the United States needs a standing navy to protect themselves from predatory attacks from the Barbary states, the Barbary pirates. And so the whole thing is gorgeously illustrated by Andrea Muti, who is also the artist of the first volume of Rebels. The colors are by Lauren Affe, or Affey. I apologize, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that, but it's the German word for monkey, so it would be Affe in German. We've seen her colorer before in a couple of things from Dynamite. She's excellent. She works well with greens, and so she's perfect for coloring historical narratives with sylvan settings, and a lot of this story does take place in the woods. That's where young John Abbott runs away to build his little boat. So I give credit to her for helping to create the historical feel of this first issue. So yeah, the great thing about Rebels is that it tells stories of the American Revolution, but it breaks them down to the human level. These are character-centric narratives. He's not just shuffling around names, dates, and movements of troops and all of that nonsense. There's a reason this is not called Revolution. It's called Rebels. It's about the people who built the American Revolution as a movement and who made it move. So at the same time as he's telling us history, he's also breaking it down to a relatable human level, and he does it very, very well. There's tons of historical detail and texture in here. Like the first volume, this promises to be worthy of a place in an American classroom as a textbook. So yes, as it was with the last volume of Rebels from me, it is also a buy from me now. And now let us hear from a man who has a classroom that may well boast a copy of Rebels one day, Chris Eberly. Maestro.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. It's a two-kind introduction. I appreciate it. Let me piggyback on several astute points you made. Number one, I couldn't agree more that the reason why the first volume of Rebels worked and why this new volume is working, because there's been a couple issues since this one, of course, is that Wood and Moody really emphasize the people who are affected by these larger sweeping historical events. So while they frame it with, like, you see Alexander Hamilton, you see the impact of the Barbary states, their corsairs attacking American merchant vessels, you never forget that this is about a family. And it's about a father who was the quote star of the first volume, and now it's his son, who is this just preternaturally gifted shipbuilder, and we're going to see this history through his eyes. And to me, both as a teacher and as a student of history, it's always the most compelling when you focus on how these events impact, quote normal people who, but of course, these people in their own way can be quite extraordinary. I want to point out a couple things. One, again, Wood he really does his homework, because he's talking about a particular period in American history. The United States is a new republic. It's very vulnerable. What people may not realize, because we're such a military superpower today, is that in this time period, our military was virtually non-existent. The founders feared a large standing military because they were living in the time of Napoleon, and they studied ancient Rome. And that they did not want a large military that might overthrow and undermine a Republican government. When I say Republican, I don't mean the political party. I mean small r Republican government. So they kept a very tiny military. The U.S. Army, for example, was less than 1,000 men. And the states relied on their militias, and the Navy there virtually was no Navy to speak of. When we think about today, where we are the world's overwhelming naval power, this is quite a contrast. And Wood really captures that in just quick strokes. He doesn't get bogged down in the history, because while I might enjoy that, he wants to entertain people as well as educate them and enlighten them. So I think it's a masterful balance of the two. You really appreciate how the Abbotts, the parents, the life they're living. Notice the one scene where they show, because John has wandered off to build his own ship in the woods, and they show you the graveyard in the back of their behind their cabin, because they're living on the frontier, and you assume that's 3 children of theirs who have died. That's my guess, because childbirth was very dangerous in the 18th century. It was very common for both women and the child to die in childbirth. There were no antibiotics. There was no prenatal care. So, and oftentimes a child would die very young if they became ill. So I'm guessing that's just a very nice historical touch there by the creative team. I also want to emphasize, just because I think it ties into today, when they show you Hamilton trying to urge the Congress to remember, because Congress controls the purse strings of the nation, to provide for a navy, and he's talking, and they're complaining about how federalism and the key argument in our nation from the beginning is, what is the role of government? And it's an argument we've been having in pretty much every presidential election. And we're going to probably have that argument again. Actually, I should say probably definitely that argument again in 2020, as well as in the midterms in 2018. Many of the founders believe strongly in state power, like Thomas Jefferson. Hamilton, who I consider next to Washington the most important founding father, and I'm very grateful they're not removing him for the $10 bill. Rather, they're removing that one of the most overrated people, Andrew Jack, for the 20, which is well deserved. But anyway, that's an aside. Hamilton had a vision, because as a bastard born in the Caribbean, I mean bastard as he was born without a sort of legal father, he felt loyalty to America, not to a particular state. And and Wood captures that in those few scenes. They show him trying to encourage his fellow congressmen to, although he was Treasury Secretary, to support a navy. So you're getting the historical context of all this. Just so people don't understand, the Barbary pirates were actually Muslim city-states on the North African coast, like Tripoli was one, Algiers. And one of the ways they made money is they would send their corsairs out, and they would attack merchant ships, and the European powers would pay them ransom so they would not attack their ships, and Britain was paying our way because we were their colonies. Once we broke off, Washington Adams continued the payments, but eventually Jefferson as president would not, and they were attacking our ships, taking hostages. This is later on they get into the Barbary Wars, which is after the events of this book. But they're capturing the turmoil of the time, the fact that we're a very weak nation, the fact that Britain is still the superpower, and this is when Washington, as president, is wrestling with, trying to keep us out of war, which many people were clamoring for. Again, always fear the mob as far as I'm concerned. And this book I know I just threw a lot of history out there, but I just want to give people the context that our nation was a very vulnerable point. It was militarily extremely weak. And the only protection we had really was the fact that we had an ocean in front of us, essentially. And, again, showing how, certain individuals, whether it's a giant like Hamilton or just this very gifted shipbuilder, can have a massive event on the course of history. So as far as I'm concerned, this is as good as it gets when it comes to comics. This is how it's done. Highest possible buy.
All right.
I like that rundown of history.
That was very quick, but thank you, sir. I didn't want to bog us down too much with it.
All right, then we're going to wrap it up with X-Men Prime, #1. This is written by Greg Pak, Cullen Bunn, and Mark Guggenheim, with art by Ken Lashley and Leonard Kirk. Resurrection begins here. In the wake of their war with the Inhumans, the X-Men are at a crossroads. Where do they go from here? Luckily, one beloved X-Men has the answer to that question. Xavier's dream comes full circle as Kitty Pryde returns to the X-Men, ready to lead them in their mission to protect a world that hates and fears them. The next chapter of the X-Men saga starts here. Have at it, gentlemen.
Shane, your rating?
I'd give it a buy.
It's more of a high borrow for me, I think.
Okay, mine is a buy with a caveat. If you grew up reading the X-Men in the 1980s, this is a very strong buy. If you didn't, it's a borrow. So for me personally, it's a buy, but I wouldn't recommend this as a buy to anyone outside my particular age, essentially.
Okay.
So,
Adam, go ahead. It features one of your favorites.
Oh, that's true, and that's one of the things I like the most about it. All right, so X-Men Prime, it's kind of like three shorter stories. It's one story with two shorter chapters that have stitched into the middle of it. It's intended to be sort of like a lead-in or a prequel or a prologue for like three different series: X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, and I think an X-Force series that has not yet been launched. So that's why we've got multiple creative teams credited for this. So the main story, which focuses on, as Shane mentioned, a favorite character of mine, Kitty Pryde, recently returned from outer space adventures with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and she's come home to Chicago. We see her practicing dance, which is something she hasn't done in forever. It's something that she did when she was a teenager, when the X-Men first got to know her, but she kind of didn't have much time to pursue it after she was too busy gallivanting around the galaxy, saving humanity and other alien races from danger and depredation. But anyway, Storm shows up and asks her to come back to the X-Men. They're at kind of a vulnerable transition point. Storm herself is having a crisis of commitment and is thinking of leaving the team. Meanwhile, the team is headquartered in Limbo, which is the hellish alternate dimension where Colossus' kid sister, Ileana Rasputin, was raised for a time by the demon magician Belasco, and now Ileana is back among the living. She's come into her full power as both mutant and mage, and she's running the place, and she has allowed the X-Men to call, however temporarily, Limbo home. Kitty comes in and explores the place, gets a taste of the status of things. She sees the all-new, all-different X-Men, which are the teenaged original 5 X-Men, plucked forward in time. They've had some adventures in a couple different volumes of ongoing series over the past few years, and we've just now reached the point in this issue where they decide they need to strike out on their own. So that's kind of their subplot in this first issue, as Kitty comes across them running a danger room exercise, only to discover that it's just a hologram that they set up to mask the fact that they, the all-new, all-different X-Men, have actually left. Now, they've gotten a little bit tired. The novelty of all these older characters who spent the first stage of their lives as X-Men looking up to the original 5, suddenly looking down to them and showing them the ropes. The novelty of that is worn off for the time-lost X-Men, and so they decide to skip to Blow, and now they're going to be starring in their own series, X-Men Blue. Meanwhile, there's a little interlude involving Lady Deathstrike, who is somewhat annoyingly still being drawn like the actress who portrayed her in X-Men 2,
Yeah.
X-Men United. She's being kidnapped and recruited by a woman named Carla, who is more than she appears because she survives getting stabbed in the gut by Lady Deathstrike's blade-like fingers. And then Lady Deathstrike is laid low by a missile and recruited for a new mutant strike force, including Old Man Logan, Sabretooth, Warpath, and Domino. You know, with a roster like that, it almost has to be an X-Force team, who eventually are going to be dispatched to, I think, exterminate mutants more than simply hunt them down and, offer them succor and offer to help them learn to use their various mutant gifts. So that's happening. The stuff with the teenage X-Men is happening, and also Kitty Pryde just wandering around the mansion feeling old and out of place is happening. But eventually, in the course of all this, she comes up with a new mission statement for the X-Men. She decides, hey, everybody, we're going to put ourselves back out there in front of the world in the wake of all this stuff that's recently happened with the mutants versus Inhumans, which has been a big theme in the Marvel Universe over the past year or so, as a conflict which has its roots outside the ground of the Marvel Universe itself. It's kind of an extra-textual thing where it has to do with a different company, a different corporate entity owning the rights to the mutant characters, and so mutants came very close to being supplanted by Inhumans in the Marvel Comics universe, dodged that bullet, and now they're on the mend in a big way. And so hence this whole big resurrection initiative that's going on at Marvel, which this X-Men Prime one-shot is supposed to be kicking off. So Kitty explains to all the X-Men assembled there in Limbo, we're going to move forward and we're going to, quote, show the world what we are, not mutants, not freaks, not homo superior, but heroes. So trying to cleave a little bit closer to the Avengers, which I'm personally not sure is the best creative move for the X-Men, because we've already got more Avengers than we can shake a stick at. Let's allow the mutants to continue being the mutants, the freaks, the outsiders, because that's what appeals to the alienated teenager in all of us. That's always been the major appeal of the X-Men. And much as I like seeing the X-Men jumping around in brightly colored spandex, it's kind of moving a bit away from the original core concept and raison d'etre of the X-Men as characters. And then Kitty Pryde follows that up by saying that we're going to, we're not going to hide here in this other dimension. We're not going to be on an asteroid, or we're not even going to hide up in Westchester County. We need to be, how does she exactly phrase this? But we can't do it from a place of hiding. We need to be front and center out in the open, which of course means New York City, apparently. There's a few other places in the world I can think of that might actually, in the 21st century, be more front and center even than New York City. But, in comics that are being marketed to a largely North American readership, New York City it has to be. But they moved the mansion to Central Park.
That's what's odd to me, Central Park.
I have to think that the city would probably have something to say about that. Whether or not they're mutant outlaws, no matter who they are, they're not supposed to be dropping buildings in the middle of municipal property like that. So
that might be frowned upon.
I'm imagining X-Men Gold is probably going to follow up on that plot thread.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so. So, it's some cool little storytelling things going on here. You can tell that there is love and knowledge of the X-Men, particularly certain incarnations of the X-Men, as Chris alluded to earlier, like the Claremont run from the 70s and 80s in the people who are writing this one-shot. And it's actually a fairly well-done example of what it is, namely an overpriced preview of the revamped X-Men line, but that doesn't really change the fact that this is, in fact, an overpriced preview of the newly revamped X-Men line. It seems to me that what it's saying most of all is, hey, out there, all you estranged former readers of X-Men who have wandered away, it's safe to come home now. Come on, buddy. Remember Claremont? Things haven't changed that much. You can come home again. So they're just kind of glossing over, with the exception of a couple of nods to the recent Inhuman Mutant War thing. They're glossing over a lot of recent X-Men history that's been going on and just saying, okay, we're paving over all this. This is the starting point. This is where you want to jump on. These are the comics that matter right now. Just come in here and start reading now. Although they are kind of... So it's kind of wise of them to bring in Kitty Pryde, a character well known to fans of the Claremont run, who has always been sort of a point of entry character for the X-Men. They're just like the POV of the new reader, using her as the POV and point of entry once again. Since she's been out in outer space, she's been out of touch with what's been going on with the X-Men just as much as longtime readers who haven't read X-Men in a while have been. So, as she's finding her feet with the X-Men, so are that kind of reader, including just about all of us in this discussion, I'm pretty sure. So, it's a good choice of perspective character. It was neat to see her touch base with Colossus briefly. Also interesting of them to point out how many different men named Peter she has, in fact, dated. Peter Rasputin, Peter Wisdom, Peter Quill, the legendary Star-Lord most recently, and even if you count Ultimate Kitty Pryde, Peter Parker, because she dated Ultimate Spidey. And having her encounter I kind of wish Danny were here just to find out what her take on Jubilee being a mom would be. But, yeah, I am feeling old right along with Kitty when realizing that Jubilee is now aged enough in the comics to have an infant son.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not a bad comic. I enjoyed it as I am a fan of the Claremont era X-Men, and Kitty Pryde is a great favorite of mine, as Shane pointed out earlier. So this was fine with me. I think Chris's caveat is certainly fair and valuable. There's one more point I wanted to make about this. It's completely left my mind. But one thing I think they could have perhaps done that would make this even better as just a lead-in to everything that's coming up, as a bridge between what's been going on in the X-Men comics over the past several years that have been read by fewer people than used to read them, shall we say, into this new initiative that Marvel's doing. Maybe put in some kind of timeline. I wouldn't expect the writers...
A front-page timeline would have helped.
Or like a centerfold, like a gatefold thing in the middle that runs down what's been happening, important historical beats with the X-Men over... I hate to say the last...
I don't even know if Marvel could handle that at this point.
Oh, that's true.
I can hear Ian Levinstein saying that Marvel probably has less idea than most readers what the history of the X-Men has been. I was going to say over roughly the past 20 years as the X-Men's star slowly fell. But that may be asking a bit much. But anyway, it's not a bad starting point for what Marvel wants to do. I just wish it bridged... I just wish that there was more of a connecting point between what's been and what's going to happen, beyond just saying, hey, the mutants were fighting the Inhumans, and now we're stopping that, and we're going to be costumed heroes again.
Yeah.
So, anyway, not a bad comic, but not a perfect one either. I got a little bit of a thrill out of it, so I gave it a high borrow as opposed to just a borrow.
And I can see Chris's point with, if you're not familiar with these characters from the 80s to early 90s, it probably won't be as impressive for you. I always like that when they use Kitty Pryde as a focal point. I like that character a lot as well. And she's been involved with many iterations of not only X-Men, but Excalibur. She was with the Guardians most recently. She's trained the all new X-Men when they were leaped from their past. So she's been around to different groups helping the X-Men. I think she, from the comic book's perspective, has a better understanding of the X-Men as a whole and what could happen. But yeah, she has no clue what's been going on since she's been in space. So I think it's good to bring her in to do that with her return.
If I could just jump in, because I just got a text. I have to go pick up my older son. So if you don't mind, guys, I'm going to give my review.
Oh, please do.
Go for it.
And then I'll have to depart. I went into this dubious because whenever I see multiple people writing and drawing a book, I always think okay, it's like when you see those screenplays written by 10 different people in a movie, and inevitably they're never good. But I was happy to say I was proven wrong here. But again, a lot of it for me, like as I was referencing before, and as Murd mentioned, and Shane, is steeped in nostalgia. Like when I open the book and I see Kitty Pryde dancing, I just went, characterization. Because I was an avid X-Men fan growing up. I mean, Dark Phoenix Saga, I still read it once a year usually. I mean, I was so taken in by that world that Claremont, Cockrum, and Byrne built, and how so much loving detail was applied to the relationships between these characters, and you really felt like you knew them. And you could sort of anticipate how they'd act, what they were going to say. I don't mean that in a bad way, just because you got to know them so well as people. And Kitty Pryde, as Murd mentioned, really was that point of entry character for the reader. And, she's looking at this through wide eyes, and yet you mature with her. Like if you start reading the X-Men as a kid and you kind of grew up with her, and as she became a more experienced, an older person. And I tried to read the Inhumans versus X-Men miniseries. I couldn't even get through it. I'm so worn down and tired of just the relentless barrage of crossovers and big events that I think especially have hurt the X-Men over the years. I think that universe has gotten just been so adrift, and then also, of course, Marvel put it in the backwoods because of the whole movie Fox thing as well, which I also think did the comic universe a disservice. There were bright points. I really liked Bendis's and Immonen's all-new X-Men. When that started, I enjoyed that thoroughly. I kind of fell off it eventually, but that's my fault, not the books. But I've been out of it with the X-Men for quite some time, minus a few little quick toes back in the pool. So I wanted to give this a shot. And the second page, when Storm says, "Kitten, it's so wonderful to see you. We need to talk," I was like, all right, this is my X-Men. You know, Storm's calling Kitty Kitten. There's that mother-daughter relationship they always kind of had that was built. I remember in X-Men 150 when Magneto in his rage nearly kills Shadowcat, or I think she was called Sprite or Ariel then. She had numerous names. Yeah. And Magneto comes out of his rage and he's horrified at what he did, and Storm says to him, "Give me my child." And that was the X-Men. Like, they were a family. And you really felt like you were part of that as a fan of it and as a reader. And that got lost for me because just too much was happening. And it was great to see all these characters I've loved since I was a kid interacting with each other as those characters that I always knew. And I think Murd's right. I think they're totally going for people like me who love these characters. Like the scene where they have Kitty remembering about her relationship with Peter and them sitting on that scene where they're sitting on the bluff. That's when he came back from the battle world in Secret Wars, and he told her that, I thought I loved you, but I didn't. That's a heartbreaking issue. It's X-Men. I want to say it's 183, I think. Beautifully done by Claremont and Romita Jr. And it was nice to see a story where they had these types of character moments. And again, using Kitty so effectively as that point of view character, as she remembers, as the reader remembers, what the X-Men used to be like before everything just went completely off the rails as far as I'm concerned. Great to see Limbo and Alanya and their close relationship, which goes back to the New Mutants era. This was solid. I mean, money's an issue now and time, but I'm definitely going to try to pick up a couple of these new books and see what they're like. I agree. I laughed out loud when I saw the book in the mansion in Central Park. I'm like, I don't know how they're going to spin that one. Maybe they're going to go back and forth out of Limbo so the NYPD don't notice them. I don't know. But Kitty's a great character. And I hope they really build on her ties with Storm, with Peter, with Kurt, because that's the heart of the X-Men as far as I'm concerned. Not all the noise and nonsense that goes on so often. So, again, if you're not an X-Men fan or didn't grow up in this period, you don't need to buy this. But if you were, I think this is worth it. So, it's that caveat buy for me. Yeah. Sorry, I got to run, guys. Parental duties called unexpectedly.
We understand, Chris.
Hasta luego.
I will leave you to it. Shane, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you on the weekend.
Me too.
And if I had more time, I would praise Rucka's The Old Guard, one of the best new books out there right now. I'll talk about that more in a future episode.
All right.
Okay.
And I'll talk about the Black Panther trailer later, so Pants can move his headphones down the road.
That was fantastic.
All right.
Brothers, I'm signing off. Adios.
Guten Abend, mein Herr.
Good night.
All right. Yeah. That was a long.
Yeah.
Wow.
The only thing I want to say about this X-Men Prime thing yet, I think it does do a very good job of resetting you if you've been away for a while. I agree with Chris that I got hooked into the all-new. What was it? All new X-Men?
The all new, all different.
Wait, no,
you're right. It was all new. It was just
all new
right.
X-Men? Whichever.
Yeah, that's right. All new, all. I'm too used to saying all new, all different because that describes the first. It's the first Claremont generation.
Okay.
The group introduced by Len Wein, Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and so forth. But yeah, it was all new. If you're talking about the teenage.
Yeah, when they plucked the teenage.
Right, with Bendis and Immonen.
I was all around that for the first couple of years, and it was fantastic. And like Chris, I fell away from it.
Me too.
Partially because it didn't seem to be as invigorating as it was in the beginning, those first couple of years. Some of it was money. Some of it was because of the quagmire that they were getting into with all the other X books at that time. So I pulled away from it. It piques my interest, some of this, because it does feel like coming home again a little bit. I hope they stick around with some of that and write some stories to give you that. As time goes on, I have a higher hope in that for the X-Men Gold than the X-Men Blue. Not that X-Men Blue would be bad. It certainly stars those teenage original X-Men going on their own adventure.
Yep. Perhaps finding out the true nature of their presence in the present.
Yeah.
Don't even.
You used 2 of them in a row there.
Preemptive.
He doubled it.
But
doubled you.
Yeah, the Beast is going to maybe find out how they actually ended up in the current time. There's magic involved. Is there a reality out there that's suffering because they're not a part of it? So.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing that I guess I thought of when I was reading that book, that they may not be from their reality that they're in because nothing changed. They all know what happened and life went on without the timeline getting skewed, so maybe they are pulled from another reality.
Could turn into an interesting take on the nature of time travel and alternate realities in the Marvel Universe.
But yeah,
I'm always up for that.
I did think it was a very solid read. I like the little nods to nostalgia with Peter and Kitty. It was just a lot of fun to see things that I miss about the X-Men come home again, and to put Kitty at center stage to pull it all together once again, because I think they did a very good job of using her to do that with the all-new X-Men. And again, that lasted for quite a while. So yeah, I'm looking forward to some X-Men stuff that might come out of this, and hopefully they'll get their course straight, although I still think it's weird that they're in Central Park. That's just odd to me.
I did buy the first few issues of X-Men Gold, up to the return of Gambit, which happens in like the 4th or 5th issue. So hopefully it's addressed in there someplace. I'll have to look through the issues in my pile.
I'm not opposed to that. One of the few X-Men issues I still have is my first appearance of Gambit. One of the ones I've held on to all these years.
That's good.
That's what, issue 266
I think
X-Men? Yeah. Well, it's timely as though torn from today's headlines. The way you mentioned, we're going on a bit of a tangent here. Talking about
That's fine.
We can tangent.
Talking about Gambit, I got an email not too long ago here from Comic Link, which is one of the major auction houses for comic books and comic book artwork. And the original cover art to X-Men 266 is coming to auction.
Nice.
That's crazy. That's an Andy Kubert cover. And, wow. I know there's a lot of interest in artwork from the X-Men, especially covers from sort of that era, and I'll be watching it with much interest.
I want to say, to track down that issue back in the early 90s, I drove up to Bloomsburg to a little comic book store that was up there that I knew through a friend who had gone there to college. And I was calling all around to the different shops in the area.
We've all done that.
And
boy, trying to find back issues in a day.
I took a 2-hour trip up to get it.
The things you missed. 2-hour trip.
Yeah,
wow.
2 hours from where I grew up to get to Bloomsburg. Nice. Well, it's 2 hours from here, too. Right. But, yeah, back then when I had time and the ability to do such.
I just got mine from the back issue bins at Pagoda. Pagoda Comics, which is Matt's and my first LCS, and just like $20 in 1993. Which is more than I usually paid back then, but I think it's worthy investment now, since I'm pretty sure that issue will fetch you like a triple digit now.
I wonder if you bought it back then around that time, that's pretty close to when I would have been searching for it, I think. I wonder if you bought it from Pagoda so that when I called them and they said, no, we don't have that, you had already gotten it.
It could be.
That'd be funny if we could ever prove that was happening. But yeah, it's a good read. But I can see Chris's point that if you didn't grow up, you might not necessarily enjoy this prime issue as much as what I think he and I did. And I think you did too, Murd, but I understand your quibbles with it.
Yeah, I think if I'd been one of the people who's been reading the X-Men over the past few years, I might feel a little bit miffed. But I'm not one of those people, so I can't be sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else recently when guys went? I mean, it's been long so far, but
I've been once again chipping away at my monolithic to read pile. So I'm just reading old stuff right now.
I was reading, getting caught up on some Justice League and trying to get. So since we read The Button, I skipped some of the Batman and Flash issues, and I'm trying to go back and catch up on those now to get caught up with everything before I move forward.
Okay.
I still really like what they're doing in Blue Beetle.
Excellent.
It's a fantastic read.
Giffen and DeMatteis.
Yeah.
And Scott Collins.
And man, bring in Ted in, thank goodness.
All right. Then I guess that'll wrap it up. And we do have some more off the racks to go on in the future, of course. And
I would like to remind people of what those are.
go right ahead, sir.
All right, so we've covered February and March now. So the picks for April, they were Batman and the Shadow, number 1. So we'll hopefully get Matt in here to bitch about that a little bit. Then Black Panther and the Crew, number 1 from Marvel. So Chris will just rhapsodize about that. Underdog, number 1 is the indie pick from American Mythology. Then for May, Bug, The Adventures of the Forager miniseries from the DC Young Animal imprint, the first issue of that. Secret Empire number 1 from Marvel, so we get to talk about that crossover in some minor detail. And the James Bond Service one-shot. From Dynamite. So we'll probably double up on those in a future episode sometime in the next month or so. And then coming up in this month of June, we've got from DC, Dark Days, The Forge, that one shot. From Marvel, Defenders, number 1. And from Dynamite, Mighty Mouse, number 1. And then July and August, we rest. We're on summer hiatus.
Well, we'll always try as much as we can to talk about current comics. You know, this was an experiment to try to keep us current with picking some books from the previews, but sometimes we fall behind in our reading.
It's not hard to fall behind in things
right.
like this. We've all got lives and commitments of our own, after all.
All right. Shane, you ready to wrap us up?
I am.
Okay, take us on.
Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send us an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. Send in some more Muddle the Merds so we never get to that penultimate one. Leave us a voicemail. The number is 2. Leave us a voicemail. The number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillaforums and let us know what you think of all these off-the-rack picks. I like the pyramidal format. That was very well thought out. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Thanks to everyone who contributes to the episodes. We appreciate it. Could not do it without you. And again, Muddle the Merds. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes one listener at a time.
Are you crazy? How can you put Michael Keaton in front of Christian Bale?
Oh, please. Even my poodles know Bale's overrated.
Thank you. That's why I say Keaton's number 1. He brought a sense of humor to the role.
Oh, if you're going to factor in a sense of humor, well, I should be at the top of the list. It should be me, Keaton, Kilmer, Lego, Bale, and that pretty boy Clooney.
Really? You're ahead of Bale? The man who personified the words, "I'm Batman."
I never had to say I'm Batman. I showed up. People knew I was Batman.